Um, I mean, so much. I mean, we can't have too many Black queer Christian stories, sermons, theological treatises. Like we can't have too many of those. This is a unique contribution to that landscape. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. What's really on my mind is the stuff at the end, because that was what is freshest in my memory. This part that you write about queerness as so much more than who you sleeping with, right? I don't think enough has been said about that really expansive way of thinking about queerness. You quote, I think, bell hooks, in the back there and say, queerness is a way of being. Quoting Hooks, you say, queer is about being the self that is at odds with everything around it. It has to invent and create and find a place to speak and live and thrive. And then you go on to say it's a cultivated space. And so that there's a dynamism to queerness. It doesn't stay static. And you just named that the center is just too small and too stingy and too confining. So one is almost beckoned to the margins because the center is suffocating. I really love that. And I wonder sometimes about how queerness becomes celebrated, is the word that I can think of right now, in ways that completely erase what I also read in there, a kind of lamentation that this is the way it has to be. To decide to stretch out beyond the center necessarily pushes one in the current society that we have to the margins. But so often I hear queer folk, and mostly white queer folk, talk about queerness in glowing terms that takes no account, right, of the way queerness has to put you on the outs with society. And if your queerness is not putting you on the outs with society, perhaps you're doing queerness wrong. Perhaps you don't really get that, as you've said, queerness is about more than who you sleep with. So I don't say that to say that I, in June, don't want to, wave my little flag and I got one right here on my desk, and I don't want to, shake my booty, like, all of the queer folk we do in June. And it's important not to lose that edge of queerness.
Well, when we talk about June, we forget, and I read this quote before, my sister made me a t-shirt out of it. She says, "They want our rhythm, but not our blues."
Oh, yes.
We've forgotten that police brutality was how Pride started. This was a resistance against police brutality. Shouldn't every Black and brown person be out in the street in June then? In the church, we've cultivated this space of queerness because the center was too stingy. We've had to be at odds with it. And that's why I put them in conversation, because I'm like, to be queer and Black is to be at odds with everything around you and to have to create a space and then cultivate it. That's what the Black church did. That's what Black queer people do every day. And again, if you are just celebrating, if it's all good, you maybe need to question what the origins of that queerness, in which people have many ways to define it. Mine is not singular, neither is bell hooks, but the origins of this is right there with the Jesus story of being at odds with everything. He stirred up the people. Isn't that wild? crucified. He stirs up the people, is what they said.
Yeah.
At odds with the system.
He's an outside agitator.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate the ways in which you draw those connections between the way Jesus, like Jesus wasn't like, I'm going to be queer now, or I'm going to be subversive now, but Jesus just lived in a way that was going to put him at odds. And connecting that to Black queerness and how, I don't have to say a word, I don't have to do anything. It's like my presence interrupts the center in ways that the center cannot tolerate. And so I really appreciate that. I think it's become fashionable to talk about Jesus as a Black man, or Jesus as a refugee, or Jesus, and those, I think it's just like you said, they want our rhythm but not our blues. It's like people associating or identifying Jesus with the population or community that today is experiencing marginalization, but I think that people who do so without this analysis that you have will then whip out the triumphant Jesus when it gets too hard to fathom a Jesus who gets utterly destroyed, right? I want to linger with the Jesus who gets destroyed.
To know you in your suffering.
Right?
Yeah.
Because to quickly pivot to, he got up with all power in his hands, or, Jesus, the victor, Christus Victor, right? Utterly, I think, diminishes the extent of the blues, right?
Yeah.
And so I I think it's a marvelous thing that you've done here.
Thank you. And to that, I would say that James Cone says that God talk is always, or theological talk about God is always metaphorical. It's Jesus is a rock in the weary land. And people many people have opened up their hearts and minds and embraced this book. And, there are the people who look at the title and go, the coming out of Christ. Oh, he's saying that God is gay and I can't reach it. And I'm like, but it would be the same as saying, so Jesus is not the victor. He's literally a lily in the valley.
Yep.
No, it's metaphorical. And if we can, psychology tells us to be able to embrace nuance, which we've gotten away in this culture. Everything has to be, I talk about this in the book, this is not a literal text. Right. This is a serious text. So I don't really harp on, well, it was this person who did this and where they lived and how, but what can we glean from the story that you're being told? And so I think that is what I try to present really for my community, our community, Black, queer, allies, church folk, because as you said, I do love the Black church. I'm my grandmother's child. It's in every bio, Lizzie Mae's grandson. And I love you enough to talk some sense into you, is what she would say. And this is my Black church, Black community, because what the Black church creates, the world emulates. We see it in music, we see it in our preaching styles. So if we can get it right at home, then maybe we can then get them to
right about it.
But I'm just like, I love you enough to talk some sense into you. And there are millions of Karmen sitting in your pews and congregations, and you're ministering to yourself. You're ministering to those who look like you and think like you. But your job is to minister to the congregation. And if the congregation before you looks like me, then this book is a tool to help you minister better, hopefully.
On the one hand, I'm like, I get how and why.
Right.
Black church folk are like, God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. I am not interested in nuancing that thing or making it more complex or asking too many questions, right? Because I need, being able to determine if it was black or white was what was going to save your life, right? We can't survive with gray areas, right? So, I think I say that to offer some grace and compassion to the folk who raised me, right? Who can't go with me to the theological places I go because it feels too risky to move on into the gray places. But queerness is thoroughly situated in the gray area. And so the tension is between black folk who were like, yeah, but this is where I live. This is where I can't help but be in the middle here, in this gray area here. And the black folk who say that grayness is a liability. Grayness is risky. Grayness exposes our vulnerabilities, right? And we can't have our vulnerabilities exposed in a white supremacist world. And so, I'm in this like moment of season or whatever of my life where I'm trying to like get it. I'm trying to understand why this seems so intractable, right? This lack of radical welcome, this lack of theological nuance, right? And I gotta say that, it's a setup. I'm pissed off about the setup that what white supremacy has done is force us to focus on the singular, right?
Yep.
For our lives. And we didn't realize that what we would ultimately be excluding was us, right? At one point you say in here, like, you talk about what queerness is an invitation for everybody to expand, right? It's not just, oh, queer folk, y'all come in and y'all constitute the expansion. Y'all represent the broad and the wide, right? No, queerness is actually an invitation to all of us to, as you said, I think at one point, prescribe ourselves, name ourselves, and break out of the labels, the confining kind of straitjackets that society has placed us in.
That's what Paul says when he says, has Christ been divided?
Has Christ been divided? Yes.
Like, wait a minute. No, it's because it's a rhetorical question, because we know love cannot be divided, but it's also this very liberating feeling of being able to define oneself in the world. And we talk about it a lot in social media. Like there's a bunch of pseudo healing that happens through great tools that can help us towards liberation and healing, but we tend to stop at that moment. Well, I saged my house, so I'm good, or I lit a candle, so I'm great. Well, there's still other steps that we must do towards liberation. That's why I say it's pseudo healing at the moment, because we think that that is it. But I would say to people, the gospel does have something to offer, a liberating narrative. And hip hop knows this very well. Metaphors are like the life beat to a good lyricist. I mean, the reason we listen to Lauryn Hill forever and a day is that sister got some metaphors. And the same can be said for this gospel. If we can maybe take a moment and say, yes, I understand that Big Mama and Paw said this, this, and this. And that's how they taught us. That's how they grew up. That's how the church taught. And they knew it. And it does feel bad to abandon what Big Mama taught us. Like, because Big Mama wasn't wrong. Big Mama sacrificed and she worked and she did it.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So are you coming for Big Mama? And it's like, no, I'm coming for you now. And what I'm saying by that is I can't deliver anybody. Like, that's not my job. But I will present to you a gospel where Jesus says that I come that you may have life.
Yeah.
Don't get to the abundant part yet. Stop there. That means, what do you have now? You're merely existing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give you life. Once you get that, then I'm going to give you more, the abundance.
Yeah.
But right now, you're merely existing. And it's okay that we had to survive. And it's okay that that's what took Big Mama from that generation to that generation. It's okay that they didn't wear big earrings. They wore pantyhose and slips. And it's okay because that's what they knew then. But do you still wear pantyhose and slips every Sunday and don't wear makeup? Right. So you've been able to let go of some things that Big Mama taught you.
Yep.
And maybe consider that you can let this go. And if you're not ready, maybe just begin to expand.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about, what Big Mama and Grandma, and for me, it was Grandma, and everybody, what they, the conditions demanded that they create what they created. We have different conditions.
Say it again for the people.
We have different conditions. I hope that the people who will come 50 years, 100 years behind us will be like, well, our conditions are different. And they will be riffing off of what and critiquing the hell out of what we have said, right? So the conditions, and this is what I think is heretical in some spaces. I mean, I can't preach this every place. That the conditions should determine, I mean, in addition to like the Spirit's influence, right? The conditions determined the moral and faithful response, right? Jesus was speaking into a set of conditions. We don't use agricultural metaphor. I mean, we do use agricultural metaphor, but we ain't talking about fig trees. We ain't talking about, that ain't what we're talking about, right? Why? Because we're in different conditions, and Jesus needed to use the metaphors that worked with the set of conditions that he was surrounded by, and confined by, really. So it's just a matter, changing conditions should evolve our faith to speak directly to the moment, the present moment. They used to sing in my Baptist church, missionary Baptist church growing up, to serve this present age, my calling to fulfill, right? So what age are you serving is a question. It's what I hear you asking. Which age are you serving?
I'm gonna need to cue the B3, the Hammond, so the musicians can go, please cue this up. Right.
Is it this present age, or is it some bygone age, right? Or are we serving an age that actually never existed, but we just think it did? Like, we have made up the age in our imagination, right? I think it's partly that too.
Hi, I'm Reverend Karmen Michael Smith, and allow me to introduce you to poor culture. Yes, poor culture. We believe in Matthew 5:3, which says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God." We know that God is the source, and that anything that we could ever want and everything that we could ever need or even desire, God's got it. So we proudly raise our hands and say, we are the poor in spirit, so that God can show up and show out on our behalf. And we also believe that anywhere that God is, there is love. And love is not only welcoming, but love is affirming, and love is inclusive of all. So join us here in this reimagined faith experience as we build this culture, poor culture, because the kingdom is ours.
I think that when we can experience this kind of internalized joy, right? That grandmama and them did know something about, right? Because they sang this joy I have, the world didn't give it and can't take it, right? Then we can use our energies and the breadth of our emotional life to fight the conditions that make it difficult to live in joy, right? So it's like if I'm beating myself up because I'm not worthy, I can't possibly be where God, I don't even know why you love me, because I don't deserve it, and I'm such a and I can't seem to, and it's just I'm just so glad that you want to be around me and get. Then we continue to try to demonstrate our worth to God, to convince God to love us, and we have no energy left to fight the actual systems that threaten our very lives, right? It's not God we should be scared of. It's these jokers out here, these institutions, these systems, these individuals who are trying to, use our lives as their playgrounds. That's recently how I've started to describe it. Like, my life is your playground. You can just move everything around and play, and like,
it's yours. You got it.
with my life, right? So I think that there's a real social and political and economic consequence collectively when we are so convinced that we don't deserve God's love, and we spend all our time trying to, well, I'm just living holy, and I'm trying to perform a kind of piety. I'm trying to perform, and we miss the work that God has for us in deconstructing and dismantling these systems that are creating these conditions, right? So there's a real personal, spiritual consequence for not thinking that you're worth God's love. And there's a social consequence, political consequence for not thinking that you deserve God's love.
Yeah, I write about that in the book, in saying many of us come to religion, faith, Christianity as some form of a fix. I'm so unworthy. The original sin, I am born into sin, and sin's too big for me, so I'm going to struggle with it my whole life, but I'm going to praise a Jesus who paid it all, but I'm going to still keep showing up every week with my 2-3 cents trying to pay on it, like a layaway.
Yes.
So narratives have gotten really confused. If he paid it all, why am I still going and making payments? So
why am I still in debt? Right.
Yeah. Why am I still in debt? So I think that if anything, I hope that this text, by the time this is aired, the audiobook will be available, because Black people did tell me, you got to get an audiobook. I'm not going to. And I'm like, we hard oral people. I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
But I hope that by the time people listen or read this text, that they do take time to open it, get some, and then pause and sit with it. And I mean, I did for 2 years, going back and forth with this, because I wanted it to be not just I didn't want it to be ego. I didn't want this to be everything about Karmen and how I felt in this. And I really took the time to listen and to present, and then to go through and try to scrape through the pieces that just felt, that's you putting your ego in it. So I hope that people receive this text as a critique of the Black church, because as I said, I was born on the third pew, and it still has, I believe, power to fight these systems, to change, to be the example of. And I also know that it's hard to hate people from afar. So I laid myself vulnerable in this text to say, talk to me. It's not about those gay people, those
Yeah.
queer people no, it's talk to me. Like you see me in front of you. And does that resonate? Because, people will often say, it's fine. It's the guy at my job because he's so flamboyant, or she wear all those men's clothes all the time. And it's like, but they are not just me, they are also you.
Yes.
And
Hello.
so there is no love cannot be divided. So so talk to me. And then hopefully, lastly, I hope people get that there is a call to not just do better, but for liberation for everybody.
Yeah. 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 I love this ending when you talk about the call, the call to Black church to realize its own possibility, right? I love what you said that, what'd you say? What we make, the world takes. What'd you say about the Black church?
Basically, the world emulates. What we create, the world emulates.
Yes, I love that. I was thinking about Trenton. There's a bridge in Trenton, New Jersey. Have you seen that bridge? What Trenton makes, the world takes. Anyway, I love that. And this line brought me back to this part in the end when you're talking about what the resurrected Black church can be. And you say that the call to crucify the Black church is an invitation to surrender what and whom the Black church has become in order for God to transform it. It's submission, right? So it's not destruction. It's saying, you know what, God, we give this over to you so that you can do what you do, transform it, take out the poisonous parts, take out the parts, and redeem it to its best self. And this notion of surrender, again, I just wonder how Black folk in particular have developed an aversion to the notion of surrender. I mean, again, and these are Black church folk who talk about I surrender all, and you're laying your all on the altar and all the things we sing, right? But we have yet to give this institution, our beloved institution, up, right? To surrender it up, to perhaps retire, wink, wink, nod, nod, to some of the folks who were hanging. I know of a pastor who will remain nameless, who has been pastoring the same church for 75 years.
Honestly,
What?
shocking to me.
What? I'm so sorry. What? Right? So it's when we surrender the institution, we recognize that we've got to give up the control, the power that we have exercised over. And I get it. This has been our domain. This is when you could, you can wear what you want, sing how you want, preach how you want. We don't have to lose that kind of imprint. Because like you said, God is seeking to partner with us. So it's not like God, give it to me and you can never have it. No, God has never, my theology holds that God does not desire to be, the great divine puppet master, right? Pulling all the strings and, working all the levers, and no, right? God has always said, come here, and then together we, right? What happens when your power gets put with my power, right? So with that surrender piece, that in order for God to do anything, to transform anything, it has to be willingly given to God. God is not coercive either. God is not like, well, I'm just going to snatch it. If you don't want to give me yourself, I'm going to take it. No, I don't believe that. That's not my theology. That God is simply waiting on us to say, here you go, to open our hands, right? So I think that notion of surrender, what is Black church willing to surrender in service to God's transformation, right? It's not, giving up everything. it's giving up the entitled sense of control so that you have a richer kind of power, right? We all know that person, when we're thinking about the Black church, we all know the people at the church that we connected to who run things, right? We can call their names. It may not be the person whose name is on the marquee. We know this.
We all know that.
that a richer kind of power is not about having the title or the position even. It's about having the influence. Mother so-and-so, the head of the kitchen committee, had influence. And so nobody cared what the pastor said. Y'all go check and make sure the mother so-and-so is all right with it. Because if mother so-and-so ain't all right with it, it ain't gonna work. And so we know how to function with power and not control. We know what that means. But when God asks us to surrender control so that we can have power, we don't know how to, we act like it's too much to ask, right? And I'm saying this not because I understand or know how. Like I'm still learning how to surrender control so that I can have power. Right? Because I drink the same water everybody else in the United States drinks. Right? The United States has taught us that power equals control. But the gospel teaches us that power is better than control. Right? So anyway, I'm going on and on, but you know, I think that that's part of what queerness has to teach us. Queer folk have always had influence. You talk about the influencers, right? Have always been influencers, even when we did not have control, even over our own destinies, even over our own stuff, our own bodies, our own, right? We could influence that thing, right? And so, again, I just think that your juxtaposition of the gospel and what Jesus was doing and what Black queerness does, even unbeknownst to us, like often we're operating like this and we don't even know what we, is just a wonderful metaphorical kind of frame to understand what the Black church needs to do next.
Well, thank you so much for your time, for your generous offering. I need to get the musicians a page. They were off their cues tonight. But thank you so much for this. It is not only an honor, but a sheer pleasure to sit and talk with you and to glean from you what not only you receive from these pages, but what you bring to these pages. And again, this is my experience, just through a lens, but has greater implications for our communities, for our world, I believe. And so thank you for you're always busy, so thank you for taking the time to read. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. And to you, the audiobook is out. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. The links below. Thank you so much, Reverend Naomi. And please Google, look up, check the links below. There's so much more to get from Reverend Naomi, and I am happy to offer it to anyone who wants to listen, because I'm also a fan. So thank you so much. Have a good night, and I will see you on the next podcast, panel, talk show, whatever it is.
Thank you so much, Reverend Karmen, for giving us the gift of yourself and your story. I don't take for granted. And I hold your story with tenderness and with grace. And my prayer is that you get poured into in the same way that you've poured out on these pages. That's my prayer for you.
Thank you so much. That's it.
All right. All right.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. You can talk for as long as you want to. I don't have any point.
I was like, oops, I'm talking too much.
No, I'm like, your partner's like, can you get off that Zoom already?
No, she not even, she understood that we was on here from 8 to 9. So she went, I don't know what she's doing, but she in another part of the house. Okay. And the dog stayed asleep. So praise the Lord.
Thank you. I will send you a link when this goes live. I'm going to do this for June, like during the first week.
Nice.
If you ever need anything, call, send out a pigeon, whatever you like. I'm there. I will help as much as I can.
All right, will do. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a good